Hello. Hello, everyone. How you doing? Right. Okay, I can see some of you are already connecting, so I'll be waiting for a few more seconds, right? Okay, you're coming fast. Hello, everyone. How are you? I hope everybody's doing well. Right. The last week before the holidays. Um, right. So, while everybody's connecting, just a short introduction. So, as you certainly have seen from my message, um, today I'm going to make a general presentation over this subject, right? Uh, Mali's youthful population. And we're going to study a specific country, Mali, but actually the example of Mali can be related to many African countries and especially Saharan and sub-Saharan African countries. I've chosen Mali just to give you specific examples, but um, it could work for many African states. Um, Moreover, tomorrow, okay, I will teaching a BB Collab class, so we can maybe work on documents. And I think I will be doing a DBQ practice, document-based question practice between, with possibly a comparison between Japan and Mali, or a country like Japan and a country like Mali. And so we can practice for the back. Okay, right. So as there are 17 of you currently, I'll still be waiting a few more moments just to give you a reminder of what we said very briefly. We have studied Japan as an example of a country having completed its demographic transition. If you remember what we said about Japan, we said that the country had undergone all the stages of the demographic transition, and that they were currently kind of exploring a new stage, which is the moment when the population gets older, and so old, with so many elderly people and so few new people being born, like new children being born, that the population of Japan is decreasing. And together we have studied the impact of Japan's population decreasing, especially in the rural areas, okay, and how it could affect Japan's further development. Tomorrow we'll be working on a document regarding the question of employment, and will Japan need to attract new people, like immigration? That's something we'll discuss tomorrow, okay? Today, we're moving to a very different place. We are moving to all these documents, as usual, will be scanned and put on Moodle, and it will belong to a summary you will be given. Today, we're moving to a very different place because we're moving to the African continent. And we're specifically going to move to this country here, which is Mali. Okay? We're moving to Mali because Mali has got is the exact opposite to Japan when it comes to population. If you look at the miniature of this video, okay, the miniature of this video, so I'm sorry, I'm going to do that in a very, non-modern way. I'm just going to show you a picture. Sorry, my phone is broken, but you still can see it. This is Mali's population pyramid. Mali, as you can read here, has a population of 20 million inhabitants. 20 million inhabitants today. And Mali has a fast population growth. I'm going to study this and give you statistics later, okay? But which is the reason why, if you look at this population graph, population pyramid, sorry, my bad. Google is, the assistant is starting for no reason. These are the people below 15. All the base here is the people below 15, and they account for half the population, a bit less. It's something like 48%. 48% of the population of Mali is below 15. And so what we're going to study today is this. I've called this lesson, you may have seen, the challenge of a youthful population. And the fact that it has a youthful population for Mali is a challenge. It doesn't mean it's a problem. It's not only a problem, it's a challenge. Okay, so Mali's youthful population. Firstly, of course, I'm going to present you with the statistics and the facts. Half of the population of Mali is young. Half of the population of Mali is below 15. Okay? Right. So half of the population of Mali is younger than you are. That's another way to put it. Okay? And I've chosen a very easy way to observe this situation and to analyze it, right? It's not very complicated. Does that represent a risk for Mali? Does that represent a risk or a problem? Okay. Does it create specific difficulty? Or on the contrary, is it an asset? Is it something that Mali can benefit from? Okay, an asset. It's like when you play cards, you know, the very good cards. Or when you own something, okay, and that's an asset, that's something you have, which is favorable for you. So is it a risk? Sorry, my bad. Is it a risk or is it an asset? Okay, so 3 parts for today. 3 parts. Explaining why Mali is such in such a situation. Sorry. Secondly, why can that represent a problem for Mali's population and for Mali's future development? Remember, we're still relating the problem of population with the problem of development. Okay. Finally, why could that be an asset? And I will try to prove you that today already Mali is taking some advantage, some benefit, some opportunities of development due to this youthful and young population. Okay, right. Is that clear so far, what we're going to do today? So maybe I should fix this if you want to screen, or if you want to, you know, keep this in front of your eyes for a few seconds. Right? Okay. Any question? That's clear? Yep. Okay. So let's start from the beginning, right? And the beginning is that half of the population of Mali is very young. Half of the population of Mali is very young. For those who've just arrived, okay, I'm going back to the map. So Mali is a country which is actually split in 2 parts, geographically speaking. So Mali is a recent, yes, of course, all this will be on Moodle as usual. Everything will be scanned and this document will be included and there will be a summary on Moodle once the lesson is done. And these documents and the mind map will be on Moodle this afternoon, okay? So Mali is a recent state in terms of political organization because it dates back to 1960. Before this, Mali belonged to the French colonial empire in Africa, and it got independence. It proclaimed independence in 1960. So this year, Mali will be celebrating its 60th anniversary as an independent state. Okay, and if you look at this, the situation of Mali is that north of Mali is in the Sahara. Okay, so it's a desertic environment. South of Mali belongs to a region we know as Sahel. It means the limit or the boundary in if we translate Sahel, okay, the boundary, it's the limit of the deserts, right? And that is another problem for Mali to deal with. Okay, that's the question of having a huge amount of natural constraints. But that's not something I'm going to discuss today. But this is where Mali is. One last thing you should note: Mali is a landlocked country. A landlocked country. That means it has no access to the sea. Okay, a few basic facts. Now, Mali's population today is 20 million people, okay? Mali's population is 20 million people. And as I've told you, half of the population is less than 15. Why is that? Why is that? Firstly, because Mali is still undergoing its demographic transition. If you remember the pattern, the model of the demographic transition, you've got various stages. And the first stage, the second moment is when your mortality is decreasing fast, when mortality is decreasing fast, okay? But natality remains high. And that's exactly the situation of Mali today. Mali has started its demographic transition, which means that today, the birth rate and the fertility rate in Mali is still very high. Look at this. Today, in 2020, women in Mali have, in average, 6 children per woman. Mali has got one of the highest birth rate and one of the highest fertility rate. What is fertility rate? It's the average. I'm just typing this for you to have a definition in the chat. Okay, it's the average amount of kids per woman. That's what we call the fertility rate. Okay, fertility rate is the average amount of kids per woman. In Mali today, it is 6. It is 6. If you want a comparison, in France, it's 1.9. Okay. In Japan, we said it's 1.1, 1.2. So how's that? Why does that? Why is such a high fertility rate? You globally have 3 reasons. Firstly, Mali is one of the least developed countries in the world, and the health system does not enable an efficient birth control. Okay, access to chemical contraception is very limited. The pill, if you want to say it differently, the contraceptive pill, or any other expensive means of contraception, right? So that's one element, certainly. Technically speaking, controlling birth is complicated. Secondly, as I've told you a few minutes ago, Mali has just started its demographic transition, which means that before, when women had 6 or 7 kids, 2 of them would die before being 18, and that was just 30 years ago. Today, child mortality in Mali is dropping. It's dropping. It's been divided by 2. 30 years ago, 1 kid out of 6 would not reach 1 year old. 30 years ago, 1 kid out of 6 in Mali would not see their first anniversary. This number has been divided by 2. It means that today, globally, 1 kid out of 12, 1 kid out of 13 doesn't reach their first anniversary. So, it means that currently the child mortality is dropping brutally. It's collapsing, whereas the fertility rate remains high. And maybe there will be some adaptation, but so far that's the case. Thirdly, you still have a strong impact of traditional visions of family, a traditional vision of what a family should be, which is a numerous family. Mali has a population which is 95% Muslim. Okay, Islam is the major religion in Mali, and there is a traditional vision of what family should be, which is carried by religious views. Okay, so let's add all this up. A difficult access to contraception. I've seen your question, and it's limited because the infrastructure are missing or the population is too poor to buy. Both. For population away from the urban centers, having access to the medicine, having access to contraception is technically difficult, like in terms of infrastructure. Plus, of course, Mali has got one of the poorest revenue per inhabitant in the world. So it's both a lack of infrastructure and the poverty of the population. Then the second element is that you've got this traditional vision. But when I say traditional, I mean all countries in the world have had this traditional vision of what a family should be. Remember, in the demographic transition model, it takes time to adapt to the fact that you have many kids, but now they survive. And so when they survive, maybe you don't need as many kids. Lastly, remember, Mali is, or just know that Mali still has a high rural population, and agriculture in Mali remains traditional, not highly mechanized. So it takes a lot of workers to work in the agriculture. And you know, when you're a family, having more kids is a way possibly to have these helping hands. I wouldn't say that's the first reason, but that's also an element. Okay? Finally, why is Mali's population getting younger? It's not only because Mali has got a lot of young people, even if it's the case. It's also because if you look at the top of the pyramid, there are few elderly people. Third point, life expectancy in Mali is low. It's 58 years old. Remember, life expectancy is an average. It doesn't mean at all It doesn't mean at all that people die this age. It just means that many people die young. It also means that you have fewer people reaching their 80th birthday, 90th birthday, 100th birthday, anniversary, right? Okay, so let's summarize all this. And the best summary is this, actually, sorry. The best summary is this population pyramid, okay? A lot of young people because fertility remains high. So each generation has numerous children, and so they enlarge the base of the pyramid. Then, due to the health system, which can be improved, to say it clearly, you have a mortality, a regular mortality among the population, and very, very few old people. If you look at this, the people over 80 in Mali represent nothing in the population. Okay, so that was point one. Mali's population, let's summarize. Mali's population is 20 million people. 10 million of them, 10 millions of them is young, less than 15. And it's increasing fast. If Mali continued on the same trend, continued on the same tendency, by the end of this century, Mali would have quadrupled its population. If Mali maintains the same tendency, there will be 80 million Malians at the end of the century. Take care. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm saying if you keep the trend, it may not happen. And if you follow the demographic transition model, it won't happen, because at some moment Mali's fertility should decline. That's the model. We'll see if the model works. Okay, good. Is that clear for everyone? If you have questions on why Mali has a young population, please do not hesitate to ask a question in the chat. So I've got questions. So Jules, is Mali able to support an 80 million population? I don't know. Today, no. But this is exactly why it's a challenge, and why Mali has to consider the possibility. And when I say Mali, Africa globally has to consider the possibility that the population of Africa may triple, maybe multiplied by 3 before the end of the century. To answer the next question, if the trend continued, Mali would have an 80 million population at the end of this century in 2100, like in 80 years. Okay, that would be so. Would it be able to support it? That's exactly the question. But more globally, would the world support such a population increase? After all, 2 centuries ago, the world population was 1 billion people. Today it's 7.5, and we've been able to go through it. So it's not only a problem of size of country, because Mali has little population today compared to its territory. It's more the question of resources, and that's exactly what I'm going to show you right now. There are actually 5 problems, and if you're okay with that, I will keep on, because I'm going to answer your questions in my next part of them. Okay, I've tried to summarize the major issues Mali meets today, because it has a youthful population. Here they are. Why is such a population a problem? First problem is a basic one, and I won't develop on this. When you have new kids to breed, you have new kids to feed. So food supply, and the problem is not food supply in itself. It's what you call self-sufficiency. Will Mali be able to provide food for its population without importing too much food? But after all these new children, all these new kids, all this youthful population may also become rural workers. So maybe they will produce their own food. So maybe it's not a specific problem after all. There is no famine. There is no starvation in Mali currently. There is some shortage from time to time, some food that can be harder to find. But globally, Mali so far doesn't have a starvation problem. So I wouldn't say it's a major issue. One major issue is this: low schooling. I have written some statistics here. In Mali, only 50% of the young population complete primary school. I'm repeating this. Only one kid out of two, only one young Malian out of two, 50%, complete primary education. Primary education. What does that mean? That today in Mali, only one adult out of three, only one adult out of three can fully read and write. Only one adult out of three in Mali can fully read and write because only half of the population has completed primary school. And so schooling is a major challenge. Okay? When 10 million, when half of your population is below 15, you need to find the capacity to go to school and school them, send them to school, find the teachers, find the professors in universities. Okay? And so that's a real challenge. And as you can see, I'm sorry to say, but once again, this is today. I'm not saying it's going to be forever, but that's the situation today. In Mali, only one kid out of two completes primary school. When I say completes primary school, I mean attend school for all the time which is due, from 6 to 12 globally. Primary school is from 6 to 12. Only half of the kids have got all their curriculum achieved. Okay, and that's no. It's not because they're dying. It's because they don't have access to school. It's because there are not enough schools, or there are not enough teachers. But also because you've got political trouble that creates tensions and instability. I'm going to move on to this for the next problem. And so, of course, Mary, that's exactly what you've said. What is one consequence? Is that when people are not schooled properly, it's harder to find jobs. In Mali, look at this. The unemployment rate in Mali is 22%. It means that 1 Malian out of 4 globally, 1 Malian out of 4 is unemployed. But 1 young adult out of 2, 1 Malian out of 4 is unemployed, but 1 young Malian out of 2. When you are less than 25 in Mali, you have 1 chance, statistical chance out of 2, or lack of chance, to be unemployed. Okay? So which sectors do they work in? The problem in Mali is that it has very, very, very little industry. Industry is um, almost, almost non-existent in Mali. I should be more nuanced, but for your comprehension, there is almost no secondary sector in Mali. So the major sector still remains the primary sector: agriculture, farming, breeding in the north, agriculture and growing in the south. Okay. Um, there is also a service sector, especially in the major city, like in Bamako, which is the capital city. You've got a financial sector, you've got a commercial sector, you've got, of course, some type of trades, local trade, and also services like all the kind of services, selling clothes, haircuts, all the services you can find in a city, right? Um, so globally, the major problem is that other people remain in the primary sector, okay, and that means that they add up to a population which is already rural and hardly getting revenues from this. So with the risk of, increasing poverty in the rural areas. Or they move to the cities, but in the cities, all the type of jobs they can find. Listen to me, that's very important. When you move to the city, the type of jobs you may find when you don't have industry is tertiary jobs, service jobs. And most of the service jobs, they demand from you some literacy. If you want to work in the service sector, it's better if you can read and write. And the very problem of Mali is how can they make sure that the population can read and write, because there is a low schooling. So when they move to the city, it's harder to find a job, because jobs in the city require reading and writing capacities. So you see, it's a kind of vicious cycle, right? So resources in Mali, mostly agricultural resources, okay, and some minerals too, especially in the northern part. But Mali doesn't have oil. Mali doesn't have gas. Contrarily to Niger, Mali doesn't have uranium to export. So clearly, Mali exports some minerals, bauxite, for example, which is the one you use for to produce aluminum, right? It has some iron. It had some gold. It still has some, but very, very limited. Clearly, Mali has very little to offer in terms of natural resources for exportation, right? It's mostly food and local production and regional production. Okay, it had some tourism before the situation became unstable in Mali. It attracted tourists because you've got a lot of you've got UNESCO heritage, like the wonderful library, Islamic library of Timbuktu. Bamako is a highly cultural place, music, a literary activity, cultural activity. So it had some tourism, sorry, but the problem is that Mali has become highly unstable, so touristic activities have dropped. Okay? So, what do young people do? What do young people do when they can't properly go to school? Or when they've gone to school, they can't find jobs. They move, they leave, they migrate out of Mali. It's a phenomenon you may know called the brain flight. What is the brain flight? My bad. The brain flight is when people with a degree, when people with certifications, when people with skills they don't find a job position in their country which is compatible with their skills. So what do they prefer to do? They move away. They migrate away from their country. It's called the brain flight. Okay, you're flying away, you're moving away, you're running away from your country because you can't find a proper job position, okay, or a job position that does not correspond, that does not match your skill. So generally, it's below your skills. Typically, in France, there are 200,000 Malians. Okay, there are 200,000 Malian. 1% of Mali's population lives in France right now. 1% of Mali's population lives in France. And overall, it is estimated that 5% of Mali's population lives abroad. They live in a foreign country. Okay? So, one example is that you've got Malian doctors. I've just read an article yesterday about the fact that the French government, right, is planning to fully integrate people out of the European Union in the medical system. And you can guess what? The medical system in France right now is under, the hospital system is under huge pressure due to the COVID-19 crisis, sanitary crisis. And so to make sure there will be enough doctors, the government is planning to integrate them fully in the hospital system in France. Among these medical staff, you've got a lot of African doctors, people who studied who made medical studies in Mali or in Niger or in Senegal or in especially North Africa too, in Morocco or Tunisia. And who will be integrated in the French hospital system. Why? Because, of course, for these people, the revenue they can gain from medical studies, medical work, medical jobs in France, the position they can take from medical jobs in France will bring them more money and will be more compatible with their medical skills than in their own country, possibly. Okay? And absolutely, Mary, that's absolutely it. For example, let me give you just one example before I still have 20 minutes. That's fine, but I need to work on this too. If you have a degree in Mali, let's say you have a degree in medicine, you have a degree in history, you have a degree in math, you have a degree in engineering. If you can't find a proper job, what will happen? You may move away from the country, but if you move away from the country, it means also that you can't become a professor or a teacher of your subject. Sorry, not discipline. You can't become a teacher and professor of your subject. So it won't help improve the educational system and the university system. Okay. So it's absolutely a vicious cycle. Now, in Mali specifically, why choosing Mali and not another country? Because in Mali, there is one last risk, and the word risk is actually a euphemism. It's a danger. Is that if young people cannot find a position, they will feed political protest and join. And that's the situation. It's not something I'm inventing, right? It's happening right now. They will join the Islamist groups that currently create instability in Mali. So let me show you a map. I'm sorry, it's a map in French because I have maps in English on this subject, but they are harder to read. Saharan Africa today is swept, is crossed by strong political trouble. More than this, Saharan Africa is under the threat, pressure, attacks by many, many terrorist groups. When I said terrorist, that's a Western point of view, okay? Or rebellion groups, if you prefer. Actually, we should maybe call them rebellion groups to remain neutral. But France call them terrorists because, as you may know, the French army is in Mali today. It's called Operation Barkhane, and that's a French presence in Mali to counter the terrorist attacks in Mali. And if you look at this, you've got two names. One is called Ansar Dine, and the other one is called Al Murabitun. Okay, it's there. Ansar Dine and Al Murabitun. And these two groups are Islamist groups that use terror attacks against the regime, against the central regime, which is in Bamako, okay? And they try to capture the north of Mali. There are many reasons for this, and I'm sorry, but I've got 15 minutes left, so I really don't have the time to explain them all. But what you should know is that the fighters in these groups, the average age of the fighters in these groups is 20. These terrorist groups recruit young people. Why? Because they offer, so don't be shocked by what I'm going to be saying. These groups offer an alternative to being unemployed. They offer an alternative to being stuck in poverty. They offer an alternative to despair. They offer an alternative to the promise of a non-future. What I'm saying is that these Islamist groups, they've got a political program, which is to install an Islamic Republic in Mali. But they also offer a network of solidarity. They also offer a possible position for desperate youth in Mali, especially for the men, because these groups are, of course, constituted of mostly male fighters. Very good question. Was it Nicolas Sarkozy who sent the French army? He did. But actually, let's make things clear, he just made it official. The French army has always been in Mali since the independence globally under some form. There was some military cooperation between Mali and France since the independence of Mali. But in the years 2000, after the terrorist attacks on New York, after Al-Qaeda developed, after the Islamic State constituted, these groups, Al-Qaeda and Daesh, they created some kind of daughter groups, daughter companies, as we could call them, in the Sahara. And that's the moment when France, and so it started under Chirac, then was made official by Sarkozy, then it was pursued by François Hollande, decided to fight terrorism in this region. Okay? And so it started with an operation called Opération Serval, then today it's Opération Barkhane. Okay? And easier to brainwash? Can I be very honest with you? I hate this word brainwashing. You know why I hate it? I hate it because it means that people who do this, they have no clue about what they're doing, as if they were fools or as if they had become, stupid or whatever. No. You know what? Okay, sorry for this provocation. Remember, I'm a teacher. I'm not here to do any type of propaganda or say, well, terrorists, they are bad. I'm here to try and explain and understand why situations happen. That's my job. If I want to understand this, if I want to understand why there are terror groups that can recruit the youth in Mali, I should walk in um, the shoes of these Malian youth. If the promise of my future is unemployment, if the promise of my future is poverty, if the promise of my future is if I ever get to school, I won't find a job, then maybe it's the governmental failure and I should fight the government. And these groups, they fight the government. Maybe I should rely on Islam to educate me. Because you know what? When you're raised in Islamist groups, you've got lessons on Islam and they teach you how to read and write. Because if you want to read the Quran, you are able to read and write. And one way to learn how to read and write in Mali is actually to follow Quranic and Islamic courses. That's a fact. Thirdly, these groups benefit from money, revenue that they get from illegal activities. And so they can get also money from this. One of the most famous Islamist fighters in the recent years was a man called Motar Belmotar. He was a cigarettes trafficker. He started his career as being into illegal trafficking of cigarettes, and he also was an Islamist. So what I mean is that being an Islamist is also a way to make a living. So now, let's make things clear. You're poor, young, rural, without a promise in Mali. Joining an Islamist group is anything but being brainwashed. It's a career. You know what I mean? It's a way out of poverty. It's a way out of despair and so on. Once again, I am not saying it's good or bad, right? I'm not here to say, oh, so I can understand, let's encourage the Islamist group developing and so on. I'm not saying this. I'm just saying, you can guess I'm not saying this. I'm just saying, brainwashed, used, certainly, certainly. Brainwashed? Not sure. Okay? Yes, indoctrinated. This one is much better. Indoctrinated, influenced, sure, but not only, they also find some interest in this. It's not a top-down influence. They also find some, not benefits, the word is too strong, but it may be a personal strategy, to integrate a terrorist group, like getting your way out of the political inefficiency, the economic desperation, and so on and on. Okay, so indoctrinated, this one is good. But once again, indoctrinated means that it's only top down. Those who rule, those who are ruled. Maybe it's a bit more complicated. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. We all tend to be indoctrinated. Okay. Wow, not very optimistic, right? Not very optimistic. Only half the population goes to school or completes secondary primary education. It means that only 1/3 of the population is literate. Secondly, large unemployment. Thirdly, people leaving the country because they can't find jobs, because there are too many new people coming on the job market. Finally, some of them being tempted to join Islamic groups, terrorist groups, rebel groups. I think that's the best definition. Rebel groups, and maintain instability in the country. If I stay here, okay, it seems to be a a curse. It seems to be a curse. Everybody's okay with what a curse is. It's the contrary to a blessing. It's something when something very bad happens to you. Or maybe it can also be, the whole African population. Remember, Jews, Africa is 1 billion inhabitants, and Africa does not exist as a single population. No, there will be regional problems, regional tensions. But there is no more risk for the African population to be indoctrinated than for any other population. And it won't happen on the whole of Africa, because you've got many regions in Africa that don't have this problem. In Northern Africa, for example, in Morocco or in Tunisia, you don't have this problem of a booming population. In Senegal, in Ghana, you've got a political stability. So this risk does not really exist. In Kenya, in Ethiopia, the economic growth is fast. So not sure you've got this type of risk. That's a risk which is very present in Saharan Africa today. Mali, Mauritania, Niger, Chad, possibly, Sudan. Yes, but not the whole of Africa is undergoing such problem. Okay? Right. So, to conclude, or not to conclude, but to complete my explanation, it's going to be much faster at the end of it. Why can it be a good thing? Why can it be an asset? Firstly, I've told you many people were leaving. Yes, they're leaving. They form what you call a diaspora. What's a diaspora? It's when a community recreates abroad. I've told you there were 200,000 Malians in France. Some of them have recreated Malian solidarity, Malian network of solidarity in France or in the US, because there are also 100,000 of Malian in America. And you know what they do? Part of the money they earn in France or in the US or in other African countries, or in China, there are some Malians in China too, they send it back to their country of origin, and it's called remittances. Remittances. What is remittances? What are they? Remittances. It's the money sent by a community abroad. Maybe I should write the definition, okay? It's the money sent by a community abroad back to the country of origin. Okay? Back to abroad. Sorry, there is a typo. That's it. Okay. So remittances is money sent by a community abroad back to the country of origin. In Mali, that's huge. In Mali, it represents 7% of the gross domestic product. 7% of Mali's wealth. 7% of Mali's wealth is sent by Malian people abroad, France, the USA, China, other European countries, other African countries, wherever, sent back to Mali. And much of this money is coming from young Malian who move to France, move to the US, move to China, so they can support their family back home. Okay? So If these people had not left Mali, this money would not enter Mali. You know what I mean? The brain flight is not only negative, it enables the Malian people to go abroad massively. 1 million of them, 1 million of Malians live abroad, and part of the money they earn is sent back to Mali, and it serves the Malian population. It brings food on the table of the Malian families. It brings investments in the Malian economy. So that's not negative at all. That's positive because it enables Mali to get investments, to get money from abroad they would not get otherwise. So honestly, that's positive. And that means that this money also enables Mali to have a booming consumer market. Young people are craving for consumption of leisure activities, music, cinema, going out, just celebrating. Bamako, the Mali's capital, is a place for partying and going to listen to music and cinema and so on. It's a capital, so the young people in the capital city, this is what they do. They consume, they buy, they watch movies, they listen to music, they drink, okay? So even if it's a Muslim country, I'm not saying they drink alcohol or whatever, but they celebrate, right? Okay. And so the more, when you got people between 15 and 25, okay, there are a specific market, there are a specific consumer market. That means that maybe they can, create a kind of virtuous cycle. If they create a new category of consumers, maybe the local industry and the local services will benefit from this. Finally, going out. Yeah, we miss it, right? We miss it going out. That's true. Finally, and I'm sorry, but I need to conclude on this because I've got a class in 10 minutes, but I'm done anyway. Many Malian people are developing digital entrepreneurship. Digital entrepreneurship. Malian youth is doing exactly what the American youth is doing, what the European youth is doing, what the Asian youth is doing, using the internet, using the digital technologies, using smartphone. Okay? In the south of Mali, the use of smartphone is highly common to create businesses like trade services or cultural services. And you know what's the advantage of the digital entrepreneurship is that it has no border. When you read the news on the computer, you don't care if the person is in Bamako or in New York. When you read books, when you sell financial services, due to the digital network, you don't need to know where the person is, where the enterprise, where the firm, where the company is. And so what's the advantage? All this youthful population is born in an age of digital economy. It doesn't mean everybody knows how to use a computer and the internet. It just means that they have an easier access to these services than the previous generation had an access to television or telephone in Mali. And so Bamako has created the capital of Mali, right? Sorry, I should have written the name well before. I'm sorry for this. In Bamako, for example, the capital of Mali, you've got many young people, and especially women actually, but not only, in their early 20s, which are creating startups. They're creating small companies, small businesses based on the digital activity. Just to conclude, there is also an activity which is booming. It's existing in Senegal. It was created in Senegal, but it's moving to Mali. People buy motorbikes, small motorbikes. At the back of the motorbikes, they put 2 solar panels. And the solar panels enable to create electricity. And they move from village to village to bring electricity for the people to plug and charge and load their smartphones. So that's a new business developing in Mali, as in all of Western Africa. People buying small bikes, small motorbikes, 2 solar panel on it, and with the solar energy, they create electricity that they go and sell to the local village because they move with their motorbikes to different villages. Okay? So that's something an elderly person, an old person could hardly do. This is something that can be done because there is a young, dynamic, and population in Mali. So that looks more like an advantage. Okay? That's it for today, folks. That's it for today. So just to summarize all this, a booming young population due to specific demographic conditions. Some problems clearly created by this. The situation is not all optimistic. Still many people to school, still jobs to be found, still trying to prevent young people from being attracted by rebellion and instability, and maybe preventing people from leaving the country. These are the problems. But in the meantime, a youthful population is a dynamic population. And you can rely on this population maybe to create new activities, create new jobs, create new solidarity networks in the country. Okay? Thanks a lot, folks. See you tomorrow. We're doing a BB collab class. Maybe I will send you another link to update the previous one, because they have told us it's better if we change the link regularly. And so we'll be doing a DBQ. Okay? Enjoy. Take care, all of you. It was a pleasure teaching this class. See you soon. Bye-bye.